I slept with my childhood enemy. Story 1.
I've always hated him. Why did I sleep with him? I opened my eyes somewhat dazed, a strange warmth across my cheek and throughout my upper body. I blinked several times as I felt a terrible headache, probably caused by yesterday's party. The dryness in my throat made me cough a couple of times. Finally up, dipshit? My whole body tensed up when I heard that voice. Why was someone in my bed? My mouth gaped when I finally absorbed my surroundings. I was definitely not in my room, or my bed. The warm surface my head was resting on was a chest, and my arms clung tightly to this person's waist. My breathing stopped. What did I do last night? Took you long enough, the voice spoke again. This time I recognized it. This had to be a dream. No, not a dream. A nightmare. My body was petrified, but still, I forced myself to look up. A quick but loud scream escaped my mouth, and my body scrambled backwards. My legs also trashed, trying to get away from him, kicking him out of the bed in the process. A loud thud and a groan were the only things I heard after. It was Michael, my worst nightmare. What is wrong with you? He screamed back at me as he sat on the floor. What the hell? What is wrong with you? I screamed back. Get away, you gross me out. I gross you out? You were drooling all over my chest for hours. I was kind enough not to wake you up, and this is how you repay me? He pointed an accusatory finger towards me. My cheeks heated at the accusation. I was not. Sure, Mr. Cuddles. He stood up from the ground, very much naked, with no shame at all. Jesus Christ, put something on. Both of my hands went over to cover my eyes. Blindly, I threw a pillow at him. I don't want to see any of that. I think it's a little late for that. You saw plenty last night. My hands dropped from my face to see my own naked body, and the fractured memories start to hit. The last clear memory I had was Michael coming up to me at the party. And like every encounter of us, it ended in an argument. I was not sure how we started discussing Michael's bed skills. Knowing me, I was probably fed up with his constant bragging, and most likely insulted his ego. Cropped images of us walking to his apartment, or me jumping on him as soon as we arrived appeared in my mind. I cringed at the last. The few memories I had was more than an excited participant. Oh God, I muttered. When the realization hit me, I had slept with Michael, the guy I hated so much. The only person I couldn't stand, and of course, to make everything worse, I had enjoyed it. Listen, maybe you could freak out another time? I have class right now. He threw my shirt to my face as he put his boxers back on. I glared at him. What, were you expecting also some morning cuddles? He said in a stupid tone. He extended both of his arms, but made no intention to walk towards me. Screw you. I got up and started dressing up as quickly as possible, my back towards him. Unconsciously, my eyes sneaked a peek at him, only to find him already watching me. I turned around, feeling myself blush. Crazy, Michael started saying. Last night, you were... I don't remember, I quickly interrupted him, not liking where the conversation was going anymore. You don't remember anything? He asked. His gaze met mine, and I could feel him analyzing me. My eyes dropped to the floor, not standing those hazel eyes. I heard a small chuckle. Okay, I see. Do you remember anything, I asked while nervously played with my hair, making my best effort to look natural and nonchalant. He took a moment to respond. He looked at me up and down with a knowing smirk on his face. Nothing at all. I looked at him suspiciously for a second, and that was our last conversation before I went home. The next day, after that uncomfortable morning, I spent the entire day contemplating my bad decisions. No matter how attractive Michael might be, he had the worst personality in the world, and had always been that way since we were kids. I couldn't remember the exact moment I met Michael, because our mothers had been friends and neighbors long before we were born, so we had always known each other. What I could remember was the image of a very talkative and noisy blonde boy who occasionally visited my house. At some point in my life, the feelings towards that boy evolved from annoyance to pure hatred, especially with that terrible personality he developed over time. At first, when we were kids, I could handle it, but eventually Michael's behavior became difficult to ignore. He went from constantly annoying me with his unstoppable chit-chat to contradicting me and trying to fight me every chance he got. Having such pride, I couldn't let him win, so I always responded to every provocation. Michael, instead of backing down, always seemed more fired up after my attacks. On several occasions, they called our parents, when these arguments became physical. Although we had matured quite a bit, and it had been years since we fought on such a scale, there was still some animosity between us. It was terrible when we ended up attending the same university. Even though we didn't study the same major, we saw each other more often than we would like. I did my best to avoid him, but sometimes I just couldn't. I guess one of those was that night at the party. After a whole day of moping and complaining about my past self, I went to school the next day. After all, I couldn't avoid it forever. Thankfully, I didn't see Michael at all. Even though I should have been glad, I couldn't. Most of the time I was a wallflower. No one paid attention to me. Unlike Michael, who was always the popular kid, who everyone loved. Except me, of course. So being noticed was definitely strange for me. And if I was honest, it was creeping me out. "Hey, you're Alex, right?" a girl asked me. Once she sat next to the bench I was. "I'm Sasha. We had one class together last semester." I looked at her confused for a second because I honestly didn't recognize her at all. "Right. So how have you been?" she asked me with a big smile on her face. I didn't understand why she was talking to me. "Your has become a popular topic around school lately." "What do you mean?" "Come on," she gave me a look like, "about what happened between Michael and you the other day." My eyes widened when all those looks and whispers around me finally made sense. Why is everyone talking about that? Well, they're all impressed that you could get with him. You guys just don't seem compatible, or at least, that's what everyone says. Not me, by the way, she quickly rambled as she played with a strand of her hair. Blonde hair. How did you manage to get with him? That question stung because it implied people were shocked that someone like me had ended up doing it with the popular kid. I felt anger surge in me, the kind that always made me do irrational things. So everyone says that? Yeah, but no offense to you, it's just Michael is Michael, you know? I knew. Oh, I knew very well who Michael was. Just a jerk who didn't deserve to be worshipped by everyone. Well, yeah, I guess Michael is the best. Why do you say it like that? I looked around and inched myself closer to her and lowered my tone of voice when I said, "Can I tell you something? But only if you promise not to tell." Of course, her eyes lit up in excitement. If I'm being completely honest, I started acting shy and embarrassed, like I was reluctant to talk about it. He wasn't that good. She gasped loudly before her hands covered her mouth. No way. What did he do wrong? I didn't say anything. I just put my pinky finger up in front of her face and I let her connect the dots. The expression on her face was comical. Remember not to say anything. It was the last thing I said before walking away, with a devilish grin on my face. 2 days later. The gossip spread much faster than I thought. In just 2 days, everyone was talking about Michael. At first, all this was very funny to me. Sadly, this feeling did not last long. Little by little, the rumors, which at first were harmless and ridiculous, turned into something more serious and worrying. It was funny if they said that Michael lasted minutes in bed. But it didn't seem so funny anymore when there were people affirming he had all the STDs on the planet, or that he refused to partake in safe sex. There were atrocious things that were being said about him now, and that seemed to me to be crossing the line. I inevitably began to feel guilty, and apparently I was not the only person who blamed me for all this. "What did you do?" Michael cornered me as soon as I walked out of campus, pulling me towards an empty street. "You started all those rumors." "Okay, first of all, let me go," I said when I noticed his hand still holding onto my wrist. "Second, I didn't start shit." "Oh, so you're telling me you didn't say anything?" "Nothing at all." I hesitated only for a second to answer, and that was enough for Michael. "What a jerk! You did say something. You suck at lying." "I don't believe I did. It was just that Michael was good at reading me, and I hated it. The only thing I said is that it wasn't the best I ever had, okay? And I said that in confidence to this one girl. How was I supposed to know she was going to tell everyone? Not the best. Right? Right?" He laughed, but he didn't look amused at all. Like you weren't saying something different that night. "You were all over me, you little vampire." "And what was that you kept repeating?" He stopped for a second, pretending to think. "Shut up, I don't want to hear it." "Oh, I remember what it was." A devilish smile appeared on his face as he got closer to me. "Stop." Both of my hands went to grab his shoulder, and I shook him, trying desperately to shut him up. Then, to make sure he didn't say anything, my hand went to cover his mouth, which he easily grasps away. Our closeness suddenly felt like too much. I tried to step back, but his hand on my wrist pulled me back in, even closer. Don't even try to think otherwise, because we both perfectly know how it all went down. Maybe I should also start telling my version of things. "Don't you dare," I snarled in his face. "Well, you started this, so either you fix it or I'll start talking. Unlike you, I'll only say the truth. They're just rumors, they'll go away." I tried to defuse the situation. "No one really cares. Dude, they're saying I'm into stuff like role-playing as a baby and shit." My hand slapped my mouth, but the laughter couldn't be contained. "Not funny." "It is, a little bit." "Fix it. Now." He emphasized every word. He didn't say, but the "or else" was heavily implied. "Look, you're an idiot if you think I can do anything to fix this. Guess what? Rumors go away quickly. You just need the next big thing to happen and everyone will forget about it. Big thing? Yeah, I don't know, a pregnancy or a breakup. Maybe like a new couple getting together? I started listing random things. My point is, something will eventually happen. So just wait it out. I'm not waiting for shit. He looked at me up and down, like he was pondering something. An idea that I knew I wouldn't like. Let's force the next big thing to happen. How? Date me. My breathing stopped, and my heart skipped a bit. Why? I don't... What? Not for real, you idiot. We just fake it until people stop talking about me. Did the steroids you take finally fry your brain? Listen to me. People will stop assuming I was bad because you decided to start dating me. No one is going to buy that. Like hell, I'm going to be able to pretend like I like you. Well, either you start practicing your acting skills or I speak up. Your choice. Either one works for me. I hate you so much. The next day. Get in, idiot. Michael screamed from his car as he honked multiple times when he came to pick me up for school. I was really tempted to just ignore him and continue walking, but I knew he had me on a tight leash. So I just rolled my eyes as I got into his car. What's up with this? Well, we have to make it believable. We're in love, remember? Yeah, like calling me an idiot makes it more believable. Real cute. What about babe? Do you want me to call you babe? He looked at me with a smirk on his face. Babe, I'm going to puke in your car. He laughed loudly before taking us to school. 20 minutes later. As soon as we arrived at school, all eyes were on us. I could practically hear the whispers of people disapproving of me, saying that Michael should be with someone better. It was so terrible that breathing became agitated and I couldn't do anything but look at the ground. Hey Alex, it's okay, Michael whispered in my ear, and I couldn't stop myself from jumping. He grabbed my hand and held it, smiling at me. It was strange because he rarely smiled like that at me. We're in this together. Strangely, his touch made me feel more calm. I smiled back at him and told myself it was only for the act. That's more like it. He kissed my temple gently and I couldn't help but blush. Michael went to drop me off at my class, but not before giving me a big hug and a kiss on the cheek. Despite knowing him for so long, we had never done anything so affectionate like that. I was completely blindsided. Of course, I knew that we would act as a couple, but I only imagined that we would walk holding hands at most. I didn't expect so many displays of affection from Michael. I didn't hate them, but they made me feel nervous and restless. Was that how he behaved when he went out with someone? 3 weeks later. As the days progressed, I became more and more accustomed to his touch, to the point where I almost expected it, although it continued to cause strange sensations within me. I insisted on ignoring them. This same feeling made me push Michael far away from me every time we were alone, which Michael didn't appreciate very much, but he didn't fight me because of it. Actually, we now rarely did in general. We were definitely not best friends, but it felt like we had made an unspoken agreement to make it less hell for the other, at least until we were done with this. People were more than shocked to see us always together. Even though some weeks had already passed since we started this strange ruse, people continued to go silent every time we passed by, and they kept looking at us out of the corner of their eye, analyzing us. I understood the curiosity to a certain extent, since despite being the most popular boy, Michael had never been seen publicly around school with a partner, and no one expected that I would end up being the one. This is the plan for today, he started once he pulled me into a secluded corner. We are going to walk to the cafeteria and we're going to sit at the table alone, preferably one in the middle. I rolled my eyes. Ugh, don't think you love the attention a little too much? Sweetheart, we're doing this for attention. I bit my lip and rolled my eyes when he heard the pet name. I preferred him when he called me an idiot. At least that way my heart didn't behave weirdly. So back to the plan. We're going to sit there and, talk, flirt a little bit. Nothing crazy. And then I'm going to make this sign. He put his thumb against his nose. I nodded, confused. That's when you're going to kiss me. My jaw fell to the floor. Kiss you? What for? It can be a peck, nothing crazy. No way, why do I have to kiss you? Because we're trying to make it believable that you actually like me. He looked at me as if I were dumb. No offense, sweetheart, but I've been doing all the heavy lifting around here. Sorry for having a hard time being fake. Not everyone is so good at it like you, I said bitterly. He didn't look at all affected by my dig at him. Yeah, are you in, or is it a task way too difficult for you? Ugh, I hated it when he dared me because that was my weak spot. I would always fall for it. Difficult my ass. We walked into the cafeteria and swiftly executed the plan. We sat at a table, on the same side. Michael cuddling up to me, hugging me with one arm. People tried to be discreet, but I could see curious eyes on us. Why are you blushing for? He whispered in my ear. I felt my cheeks get even more hotter. Still not used to it? Get over yourself, it's just warm and you're like a heater. I made sure to shove my elbow in his chest. He chuckled as he grabbed my elbow. Heater, as I'm too hot? More like an easy way to waste space and energy, especially when not needed. This time he laughed honestly and kissed my cheek, making me blush even more. You've always been funny. I looked at him surprised by the sudden compliment. His eyes looked deeply into mine, and that made this warm feeling in my stomach grow. He winked at me before getting up and walking away. Oh, wait. What about the kiss? Did he insist so much just to forget about it? That's when he stopped for a second and looked back at me standing in the middle of the cafeteria. His thumb touched lightly his nose, pretending he was scratching it. I got up quickly and walked up to him. I wanted to punch that smirk off his face, but I couldn't, so I just kissed it away. It started as a peck, but then it got more intense when Michael grabbed my face. My heart raced, and that's when I had to push him away. I looked at him, confused, just to find him as red and breathless as I was. If anyone said anything about it, I didn't know because my eyes were only on his. Michael pulled me by the wrist out of the cafeteria. That was enough to break the spell for me. It was just a kiss. Why was I so flustered? Well, that was crazy. I think we got them in there. People are so dumb sometimes, right? He started rambling really fast out of nervousness. Michael wasn't answering. He just kept dragging me in silence. I think we both are great actors. We totally should think about changing majors because... Michael stopped and finally turned around to see me. His dark eyes made me choke on my words. He stepped closer, and in response I tried to step backward only to feel a wall against my back. His hands reached for my cheeks, and he looked into my eyes. I felt like my heart was going to explode out of my chest. Our faces were so close when we both heard a gasp and giggles. We both jumped and turned to look at a group of people who were pretending they didn't just see us. Michael coughed before looking down. He tried to step away, but my hands reached for the front of his shirt. Before he could, he looked at me surprised, and a big smirk appeared on his face. This time, he was the one to close the distance between us, in a hotter and passionate kiss. Don't ever say I don't pull my weight, I whispered in between kisses. 2 weeks later, after that kiss, my head was full of Michael. I could not stop thinking about him. I didn't understand why this was happening to me. I was supposed to hate him, but now every time Michael approached me, instead of feeling disgust or hatred, I was only able to hear the loud sound of my heart. Although it hurt my pride to admit it, I now looked forward to those little moments we spent together, acting as a couple. A small part of me desiring more from him. I was addicted to him, whispering jokes in my ear when we were supposed to flirt, and I loved the way he grabbed at my hand every time I was anxious in public. Even though I would never say it out loud, Michael was a sweet man, and now I understood why he was so popular, and why everyone wanted to be around him. Today was no exception. I walked out of my class expecting to find Michael waiting for me, and he was, but he was not alone. A group of people was around him. I tried to pretend I didn't see him and escape, as I didn't like big crowds, but Michael called my name as soon as he saw me and signed me to come over. I stood by his side and he integrated me into the group by putting his arm over my shoulders. It's just crazy that you guys are together, one of the girls in the group said. How did this start? Michael and I exchanged looks for a second, uncertain of what to say. This was the first time someone had asked. Well, it's a funny story, Michael started explaining. Funny story? Yeah, I guess that's what you would call it. Actually, I liked him first. Everyone looked at each other surprised. Even I had a similar expression. Since we were kids, I've always liked how he was so unapologetically himself. He didn't care about what others said. It's always been me following him around like a loser. His head reached for me and gently combed my fringe to the back of my ear. What about you, Alex? Someone else from the group asked. And that took me out of my trance. I mumbled clumsily. I looked at them and then at Michael. He had an expectant look on his face. Everything felt like too much for me. Excuse me, I need to go somewhere. That's the only thing I said before walking away. I was almost out of the campus when I heard someone rushing towards me. Are you okay? Michael asked once he was next to me. Yeah, perfect, I answered without looking at him. I just continued walking. Alex. He stood in front of me, stopping me. What is it? I stayed quiet for a second. I took a deep breath before making up my mind. Things couldn't keep going like this. I want this to be over. He looked confused at me. What? Yeah, this plan we had going on, it's over. You got what you wanted. No one is talking to you anymore. So why keep going? It's pointless. I needed desperately for this to stop, for the well-being of my heart. It was scary how much I had fallen for him in such a short time. I needed it to stop. I couldn't fall for something that was not real. An act Michael was doing for the world to see, not for me. Pointless. He looked at me angrily. Even with that ugly glare on his face, he looked handsome. Yeah, we should just go back to how we were. not waste our time and energy anymore. He walked closer to me and pointed an accusatory finger at me. He opened his mouth like he was ready to give it to me, but he didn't say anything. He just sighed, defeated. Fine, have it your way. You always do. 3 weeks later. It was Friday night, and it had been a week since the last time I saw Michael. I decided to go to his random party in the hopes that alcohol would make me forget about him, even if it was just momentarily. Of course, with the luck I had, Michael was also there. When our eyes met, he quickly looked away, and that made me feel a sting on my chest. I tried to also look away, but it was like my eyes couldn't stop looking for him, even when he was already talking to some random guy. That person whispered something in his ear, and then Michael proceeded to laugh loudly. I felt my chest full of jealousy. Michael whispered something back, and then looked again at me. Quickly, I looked at my beer as if there was something really interesting in the bottle. When I looked up again, Michael was already walking towards me. Hey, Michael said. What are you up to? Nothing much. I took another sip of my beer. Enjoying the party. Or more like, enjoying the view? Excuse me? Come on, you've been staring at me. You haven't been subtle. I blushed. Presumptuous of you to assume I've been looking at you. Oh, really? Then who? I looked for a second around the room until my eyes settled on the guy Michael was just talking to. Well, the guy you were with is pretty hot. Michael's expression was comical. His mouth was open and his furrowed eyebrows. It was a combination between shocked and being pissed, but that expression turned fast into a devilish grin. Oh, no. Oh, really? Then I can make you both acquainted. Before I could say anything, Michael pulled me towards the guy, whispered something to him, and introduced me. The guy started to ask me questions with certain interest, and I tried to make my best effort to show the same interest back. But I felt like I was losing this game, especially with Michael there constantly laughing at me with a smirk on his face. He knew I wasn't into him at all, but he enjoyed testing me. Anyways, obviously you guys were in the middle of something, so I'll let you be, I quickly said as an excuse to escape. Well, actually, Michael said that you were interested in me, the guy started saying with a grin on his face. That bastard. I looked at Michael, pissed. I was thinking we could have fun, the three of us, the guy proposed. I looked at Michael like I was looking for help. You can say no if you're not interested, Michael said. Of course this idiot was doing all this to make a point and make me back down. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction. To Michael's surprise, I ended up accepting and was even the first to push them to find a room. Once inside, the boy's lips found my neck. Michael kept his distance from us for a second, watching us. He no longer looked as happy as he did before, and I blushed under Michael's intense gaze. The guy separated himself from me and approached Michael. I felt a terrible sensation in his stomach when he kissed Michael on the lips. I couldn't bear to see them. I thought I could, but the pain was too much. Without saying anything, I ran away from the room. Alex, Michael screamed as he followed behind me. Leave me alone, Michael. I walked even faster. No, I'm not leaving you alone, he screamed. The seriousness in his tone made me stop, but I didn't turn around. I wasn't strong enough to see him face to face. Why did you leave like that? Because I didn't feel like doing it anymore, I lied quickly. Right, but why? Just because, no reason, I shrugged. No reason? He walked to stand right in front of me. Then why did you look like you were about to cry? I opened my mouth to explain myself, but I felt a knot form in my throat. I'm sorry, he interrupted. His hand reached for my shoulders and he looked deep into my eyes. About tonight, about everything. I expected him to make fun of me or tease me. Not this. All this time I didn't realize, but I was so desperate for your attention. I ended up doing anything to get it. The worse you treated me, the more I misbehaved, because even if it was for bad reasons, that meant you were looking at me. He stopped for a second, before laughing at himself, like some stupid kid pulling the pigtails of the girl he liked. What? Stop. You don't like me, you hate me. I felt my eyes fill up and I tried to look away. But his grip on me held me in place. Stop pretending. No one is watching. I don't hate you. I'm not pretending. Never was. Why do you think I slept with you? His hand went to hold my chin when I stayed quiet. Remember what I said last time? I meant every word. I've always liked you, just didn't know it. So if you want to reject me, or you want me to leave you alone, you can say so. But don't say I'm not being honest. I was out of words, my heart beating hard against my chest. I was confused, but the only thing I knew was that I needed his lips on mine. Instead of saying it, I raised my hand to my face, and I touched my nose with my thumb. He smiled at me brightly. Aren't you cute? It was the only thing he muttered before kissing me. I like you too, I whispered, between kisses. It was about damn time you said it. I laughed at that. Sorry for making you wait. You'll have time to make it up to me. No more fake dating. This time it's for real. This time is for real. He grabbed me by the neck and kissed me again. Next Monday, after the party, Michael and I spent the entire weekend at his apartment, enjoying each other's company in every way. When Monday came, Michael wouldn't let me come home, and I ended up attending class wearing his clothes. When I came out, he was already waiting for me. When I took his hand in mine, I could practically hear the people's whispers. Haven't they ended their relationship? Are they together again? If I wasn't so happy, I would have resented the attention. Unlike me, maybe that bothered Michael because, in front of everyone, he grabbed my face and planted a passionate kiss on my lips. Want to go to the beach? Michael asked me, once we were inside his car. I looked at him confused. Right now? Yeah, why not? Well, it's an hour away and we have class tomorrow, I stated the facts. So, who cares? He had a mischievous smile on his face. A first date on the beach would be cute, don't you think? I hummed, smiling back at him. I do love the beach. I know you do. You do? Of course, when we were kids, you always looked so excited every time your parents took you there. You remember? How could I not? I felt so moved. I could cry, but instead I just kissed his cheek and rested my hand on his thigh. Let's go to the beach. I want to go there with you. 1 hour later, when we got to the beach, we played in the sand and then swam naked, throwing water at each other and laughing at each other's jokes. When we started to get cold, we got out of the water and they started dancing, holding hands while we watched the sun go down. Michael whispered to me how happy he was, and I just kissed him in response. I want to see how long we can do this, he said between kisses. I want to see if we can do this for the rest of our lives, I replied with a grin. Conclusion. After that, Michael and I started dating for real. Surprisingly enough, it turned out that Michael could be sweeter than he already was. We were always together, and when we couldn't be, Michael always called me, telling me how much he missed me. Although, to be honest, we continued to fight quite a bit. The good thing was that things never escalated to something serious, and we were also both quick to say sorry. He made me very happy. The end.
Stuck in a sauna with my nemesis, story 2.
It started with a single drunken kiss. The kind of stupid decision you make when you're drunk that makes you want to swear off alcohol for the rest of your life. Or 3 months in my case. But that's besides the point. The annual office party was something we all looked forward to. It was a chance for us to finally unwind with each other, be able to enjoy each other's company as more than just coworkers. And yes, I know it's not always a great idea to get super close to your coworkers. I knew that even back then. I'd also known never to kiss your coworkers, which is just a testament to how drunk I got that night. Martin was a friendly guy, well liked even though he had been only working there for a few months at that point. He was charismatic, good looking. We sat beside each other every day, and he was the type to strike up a friendly conversation with me randomly. At that point, we hadn't been super close friends or anything, but I did have some admiration for him. Our relationship at that point had been distant but amicable. And then I got drunk. We got drunk. We got drunk and somehow in the late hours of the party, when everyone else was either getting ready to leave or slumped against some piece of furniture dozing, Martin and I had ended up by ourselves in the corner, striking up a conversation that had somehow, inexplicably, ended up with us locking lips against the wall. Perhaps I had been so repressed at that point that I had just jumped at the opportunity. Due to work, it had been a while since I'd gotten any action, romantic or otherwise. Plus, he'd been a damn good kisser too. I didn't think anyone had seen us. We pulled away from each other seconds later, laughing and giggling against each other's lips like silly children who'd just done something naughty. His breath had reeked of alcohol, and I was sure mine had too. Tons of fun. Eventually, we parted ways and went to do other things, and the night ended when our boss, Dennis, who had somehow managed to remain sober for the entire night, stepped into the room and announced that the party was over. Someone called me a cab, and one way or the other, I was home, comfortably asleep in bed. The following morning, I didn't remember much of the party, especially into the later hours. But I definitely remembered what had happened between Martin and me. I was somewhat embarrassed that I had lost control to the point of doing something like exchanging a drunken kiss at a party, but at the same time, it felt exciting. Like I was young and in college again, experimenting with guys for the first time. I wondered if it had been just as exciting for Martin as it had been for me. I wasn't so optimistic that I thought we would spark up a passionate romantic relationship or something, but I at least hoped that it would break some of the ice between us. The next time we saw each other at work, I tried bringing it up in private, but to my chagrin, Martin had just laughed nonchalantly. "Oh, that?" He chuckled. Peter, we were drunk. I hardly think that counts as anything exciting. We stood by the water cooler, talking in low tones. I blinked, trying not to let my surprise and, well, embarrassment show on my face. He said it so casually, like he hadn't given it a single thought since that night. And maybe he hadn't. For someone as popular as him, I guess a kiss like that didn't mean much to him. And perhaps it was just my bruised pride, but Martin suddenly seemed a lot more arrogant in my eyes. Ah, really? I smiled tightly as I reached out and grabbed a cup, filling it with cool water. I just thought it was funny is all, but I guess you don't see it that way. I mumbled, bringing the cup to my mouth as I turned and walked back to my seat. The conversation ended peacefully enough that day, but that would very quickly become a rare occurrence. A very rare occurrence. Our dislike for each other grew gradually. Admittedly, it had been my fault, just a little bit. I couldn't quite help the fact that I was offended and showed that by getting just a bit colder towards Martin. Martin, in turn, noticed this and quickly became irritated with me, returning my coldness with a chilly attitude of his own. And when we couldn't keep up the frostiness anymore, we began to bicker. Peter, will you please check your inbox? What? Why? I sent you something over an hour ago and it hasn't even been opened. I don't know what you're always doing on that computer, but it certainly doesn't seem to be anything work-related. You've got lips and a tongue, haven't you? A simple, hey, I just sent something over, would suffice instead of just plopping it into my inbox and assuming that I would telepathically be able to tell that Martin sent me something. I knew I sounded hysterical, but I had enough. If I wasn't a civilized man, I would have thrown him out of the window. Exchanges like this were common, and they were usually noticed by our coworkers. They started out being baffled and kind of amused by our spats, but I imagine they must have gotten tired at some point. I tried to ignore them as much as I could, but it was difficult when we sat so close to each other. We were constantly nipping at each other in ways that were simultaneously exhausting and, well, a little exciting. I didn't know it at the time, but bickering with him became something I had this weird anticipation for. I'd be getting ready in the morning and remember that I was going to see him, and I would groan and roll my eyes. But I secretly looked forward to it. It was strange, and I imagine it must have been the same for him. Neither of us noticed, of course, but other people certainly did. A few months later. Months passed. The company came into more money than had been imagined, and it was decided that something else would be done to celebrate instead of the usual party they threw. A lot of people were disappointed at first to learn that we wouldn't be having a party. I was quite relieved, for obvious reasons. We were all equally delighted to know what we would be doing though, which was taking a company trip. There weren't many of us working there after all, so the price would hardly be outrageous. Not to mention, not all of us would be able to go. Some of my coworkers were married with children. They could hardly afford to suddenly leave on a 2-week trip. I was not married with children. Seeing as I was in my early 30s at that point, I mourned that fact sometimes, but certainly not that day. A paid 2 weeks vacation at a nice hotel? Who wouldn't jump at that kind of opportunity? I spent the days after the announcements at the office preparing for the trip. I was so excited that I had failed to consider the one thing that would, without a doubt, completely ruin the experience for me. It slapped me right in the face just a few days to the trip. On the company group chat, we were sent the room assignments for the duration of the trip. I smiled as I opened the message and scanned the list to see who my name had been paired with. My smile vanished as soon as I saw it typed neatly beside Martin's name. My smile fell. The good mood I'd managed to maintain for days dissipated in an instant. No, I thought. Absolutely not. I was just barely managing to tolerate seating close to him at work. That was one thing. I knew that I would clock out eventually and head home, not having to see or hear anything about Martin for the next couple of hours, or days if it was the weekend. That was all well and good, but sharing a room with him? For 2 weeks? Sleeping in the same room, waking up, sharing a bedroom? It was going to drive me crazy. I was already going crazy just thinking about it. My instinct was to call up my boss and ask if the arrangements could be adjusted, but I hesitated. Wouldn't that be a little childish? My feud with Martin was already a little immature, I was willing to admit that to myself. So I actually felt a bit of shame at the idea of calling just to request a change of our sleeping arrangements. It made me feel embarrassed, so much so that I decided against it. It would drive me crazy, sure, but just how bad could it be? I was sure I would be able to handle it. A few days later, we all poured into the buses that had been brought over for us. Part of me had hoped Martin wouldn't show up for the trip at all, but to my dismay, he was there that morning. Of course he was. He was just like me, a bachelor without anything better to do. Our eyes met briefly, but he looked away almost immediately. Fine by me, I thought. The less we managed to acknowledge each other during the trip, the better. I wanted to actually enjoy myself after all. The trip was long, but I slept through most of it. When I woke up, the bus was just pulling into the parking lot of the hotel. I sat up, dazed but excited. The hotel was beautiful, and I knew the rest of the town was as well, seeing as I had done my research prior to that day. I was determined to enjoy myself, and I wasn't going to let anything stop me from doing that. We all trailed into the lobby with our luggage in tow. Dennis, who was the one organizing the trip, called out to all of us and instructed us to stay by our roommates while he sorted out getting our keys from the front desk. Reluctantly, I located Martin and went to stand beside him, dragging my suitcase along with me. He glanced at me. "I hope sharing a room with you is more enjoyable than sitting beside you," he said quietly, in a tone that made it sound like he did not believe that it was at all. I scoffed, crossing my arms over my chest. "I've shared a room a few times and I've never had any complaints. Just make sure not to get in my space," I retorted. Beside us, I heard someone sigh. We both turned to see it was Millie. She sat near both Martin and I at work, so she had bore witness to a lot of our arguments over the months. "Come on, guys, here too?" She shook her head with a laugh. "I can't believe you ended up in a room together." "Neither can I thought. "Try not to rip yourselves apart, please." She pressed her hands up against each other playfully, as if she was seriously begging us. "It's for 2 weeks, so you guys have got to learn how to tolerate each other for now." "Relax, we're not kids," Martin said, giving Millie that easy smile of his. "We'll be good as gold, or, well, as long as Peter here will allow." I turned my head to him, glaring. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means you're always the one picking a fight," he said bluntly. "If you don't do that, then we'll be fine." Irritated, I clicked my tongue and looked away from him. I wanted to promise Millie that we wouldn't argue too much, but I couldn't be sure with this guy. Millie sighed again and brought her palm up to her forehead in exasperation. Dennis returned with our keys. He handed them out to each pair and ended up giving our key to Martin. It was, in all likelihood, probably because Martin was the one standing the closest to him, but it irked me just a bit regardless. Our 2 weeks here start officially tomorrow, so I advise everyone should rest up for now. Dennis said, "It was a long trip, and I'm sure you'd all like to sleep in a nice, comfortable bed." Everyone mumbled their agreements, myself included. Sure, I just woken up, but that bus seat had hardly been comfortable and my neck was killing me. The idea of snuggling up in a proper bed sounded very appealing to me in that moment. We headed to the elevators and gradually dispersed as everyone got off their respective floors. Soon, it was just Martin and me. Silently, I glanced at him as the elevator continued to rise, taking us to the 9th floor. Part of me wondered if this arrangement had just been a coincidence. There was no way it could have been. It was clear to everyone that Martin and I disliked each other. Was this someone's attempt at trying to get us to settle our differences? As if sensing my stare, he looked over at me and raised a brow as if asking, "What are you looking at?" Slightly embarrassed, I turned my head away again. Even if it was a deliberate push for us to get along, I didn't see it happening. Martin seemed too full of himself for that to happen. At least, that's what I told myself. In truth, my pride was still bruised, and I have a habit of being stubborn. Just a bit. The elevator doors opened, and we walked down to our room. Our first night in that room together can be summed up in 2 words: awkward and infuriating. The room, while nice, was not too big. It wasn't small either, but it was not big enough for either of us to effectively ignore the other's presence. As we moved around the room and tried to settle down, we kept running into each other. At the table, at the closet, on the way to the bathroom. For the time being, we tried to maintain the peace. We tried to follow Millie's advice and not eat each other alive. And we managed to do this for like 20 minutes. but eventually he got into the bathroom to take a shower and ended up staying there for just a bit too long. I sat in my bed, waiting for him and bouncing my knee impatiently, before I stood and went to knock on the door. "Could you hurry it up, please?" I called out, trying to keep my voice as civil as possible. "I'd like to take a shower too, preferably sometime tonight." "Relax, I'll be out soon," he responded, and all I could do was huff and go back to my bed. He stepped out soon enough, now wearing more comfortable clothes. I sighed and stood up. "Took you long enough," I complained as I walked past him. "Sorry to have kept you waiting, Your Honor," he responded drily, still drying his hair with a towel. I scoffed and stepped into the bathroom, shutting the door behind me. The bathroom was still warm and smelled very strongly of the same soap I had smelled on him a couple of times. Not that the way he smelled was something I paid close attention to. I leaned against the door and sighed. I couldn't believe I'd have to deal with this for 14 days. So much for a peaceful vacation. I had no idea just how much more complicated it was about to get. The next few days. Our trip began in earnest the next day. Martin and I woke up and got ready, stepping on each other's toes the entire time. Still, we emerged from our room and went to meet up with the others in the lobby. We went sightseeing that day as a group. Later, we would get the opportunity to explore the town individually, but it was certainly fun as a group. I managed to stay out of Martin's way for the entire time we were outside, and Martin stayed out of mine. As the sun set, we headed back to the hotel, laughing after a day of fun. All my stress had been sucked right out of my body for a few perfect golden hours, and it returned as soon as Martin and I were alone in our room again. I sighed to myself as I laid on my bed, scrolling on my phone. I was looking forward to the next morning. As we walked, Millie had come up to me and pointed out a sauna the locals frequented. I read reviews online. Apparently it's like super relaxing. She shot a sideways glance at Martin. If he's really giving you that much trouble, it might be a good idea for you to unwind there for a bit. I thought about that and decided that, yeah, she has a point. The next morning, I was up at the crack of dawn. I moved quietly, not wanting to wake Martin, who I had assumed was still asleep. Perhaps I should have paid closer attention to his bed, but the room had been dark, and I had still been tired. I left the hotel and began the short walk to the sauna. The morning air was fresh and crisp and cool. I reached the sauna, paid for an hour inside, and changed into a towel. The person at the front desk told me I had come at a good time. There was only one other person in the room. I would have preferred it if there was no one else there, but how bad could it be with a single other person? I entered the room with a pep in my step, eager to just enjoy the feeling of the warm steam on my skin. And I walked in on none other than Martin sitting on one of the benches, his head tipped back against the wall and a towel covering his eyes. I froze in place like deer caught in headlights, cursing my luck. I waited for him to realize that he wasn't alone, but he didn't move. And that was when I realized that he was fast asleep. His lips were slightly parted, his bare chest rising and falling in time with his deep breaths. I probably should have just left right at that moment, but I found myself lingering. Every so often, I would find myself wondering just why exactly Martin seemed to be so popular, especially with women. And often, I would get a very poignant reminder of that reason. This was one of those reasons. To my complete shock, I couldn't help but stare at the way the skin of his torso flushed. It was coated in a thin layer of sweat. I watched silently as a drop, water or it might have been sweat, rolled down from his collarbone, down the swell of his chest, down his sculpted abdomen, and disappeared past his towel. "Peter?" I jumped, my gaze snapping back up to his face. He had woken up and was peeking at me from a small gap in under his towel. My face turned horribly red. I hoped he would just think I was flushing from the steam. He sat up properly, taking the towel off his face and watching me with a slightly puzzled expression. "What are you—" "I guess we had the same idea," I said quickly. How long had he watched me stare at him? I wanted to disappear into the steam and become invisible. I thought I'd check this place out, but since you're already here, I turned stiffly to go. "You don't have to go. Multiple people can stay in one sauna. Or did you not know that?" I heard him say. I didn't need to look at him to know he was smiling. I could hear it in his voice. He had caught me staring at his body. I wanted to claw at my hair. I could have just left, but now it felt like if I did that, I would be admitting defeat. Defeat to what? I didn't know. But it definitely felt like Martin was issuing some kind of silent challenge to me. Do you have the balls to sit in here with me even after that? That sort of feeling. My face was still burning, but I turned around to face him. He was indeed smiling. His elbow was propped up to his knee and his chin was resting against his palm. You're right, I responded, smiling stiffly back at him. I walked into the room and sat on the bench across from him. I had hoped the steam would warm me up on that chilly morning, but at that point I felt thoroughly warm all over without it. I guess I'll relax for a little while, I said. A few hours later. I didn't last 30 minutes in there with him. I couldn't. I was sure that if I stayed any longer, I would either die from embarrassment or strangle him. When Martin found a sore spot he could abuse when it came to me, he never, ever let it go. And that day, I had managed to let a terrible weakness slip. The fact that I still found him attractive even after our months of bickering. He'd sighed dramatically and put his towel back on his face, leaning back as if putting himself on full display for me. When he did move, it was to make the room even hotter, which worked up more of a sweat than I would have liked. He saw the irritated expression on my face and gave me a look of fake concern. "What's up, Peter?" he asked me, cocking his head. "Too hot for you?" I scowled, unable to take his teasing any longer. I stood up. "Yes, actually, I'm heading back." I huffed. I stormed to the door, but not fast enough for me to not hear him quietly chuckling under his breath as I did. I showered and went back to the hotel, grumbling under my breath the entire time. I was done for. He was never going to let me live this down. I was frustrated, both with him and myself. There was no way I still actually felt something for him. Was there? We had just shared a kiss. It had excited me, but he seemed to not be impressed by it. And that was that. Now we disliked each other. That was how things had turned out. But if that was the case, I wondered why. Why was I still red-faced? He was an attractive guy, sure, but surely that alone didn't warrant any kind of reaction. A few days later, Martin was smug. From that day at the sauna, anytime I tried to snap at him in my usual way, it always felt like it fell flat. It drove me crazy how helpless I felt. Our relationship felt more childish than ever in those days. In our hotel room, he started casually strolling around shirtless, as if inviting me to look as much as I wanted. I wanted to smack him. One day, I couldn't take it anymore. "Can you please put on a shirt?" I snapped as he got up to turn the television on. He paused and turned back to me, and I immediately regretted saying anything at all. Why? Is it bothering you? He asked me. The oblivious attitude made me clench my jaw. You know exactly why. I hissed, my ears burning. You're acting like a peacock. It's childish. He turned to face me fully then, crossing his arms over his chest. I'm childish? That's rich. He laughed. Do you even know how you act? I stood up, now simmering with anger. What's that supposed to mean? It means you act like a little boy, obviously. You always do. You're doing it right now. Annoyed, I stormed over to stand in front of him. We were about the same height, but I had a smaller frame. I don't act like a little boy, I argued, even though I knew fully well that I had the tendency to be childish. You absolutely do. You have since that night. He snapped back. I recoiled slightly. It was the first time either of us would bring up what had happened that night. Well, I spluttered out, flustered and caught a bit off guard. Well, I'm sorry for being offended at you just pushing me to the side after that. When I said it out loud, it sounded more like a confession than I would have liked. Martin scoffed. What? So that's why you got so prickly every time I tried to talk to you after that? He asked. You immediately tried butting up with me again like nothing happened. Like you just wanted to completely ignore what had happened that night. Like it was such an embarrassing thing for you that you wanted to erase it from existence completely. I threw my hands up in frustration. Of course I would get prickly. Well, maybe I just regretted what I said that day. okay? He spat suddenly. Maybe I was trying to make up for it, but you never gave me the chance. You just went right to acting like a spoiled kid. I am not... I was about to complain at him, comparing me to a child again, when I paused, playing back his words in my head. You regretted it, I repeated, narrowing my eyes suspiciously. Martin blinked at me, as if he just realized what he had just said. I mean, I guess it might have been harsh for me to just brush you off like that, he said after a moment. His words sounded significantly less confident than they had just the previous moment. I wanted to apologize. I frowned at him in confusion. So why didn't you? I just said you didn't give me a chance to, he huffed. You just went straight to being angry with me. That's only because I thought you were trying to... My voice rose in volume again as I started to defend myself, but I paused inside, deciding it wasn't worth it. I raised a hand to my forehead and rubbed it, exasperated. In any case, just put on a shirt, I grumbled. I still don't know what this has to do with you. He was still feigning ignorance. I just want to be shirtless. Oh, give me a break, Martin. I groaned, rolling my eyes. Is this fun for you? Watching you try to deny that you're not still attracted to me? He smiled then. Yeah, I'm having a blast. What makes you think... I started to deny it, but the way he raised his eyebrow made me realize that it would be completely pointless. You're infuriating. Why are you like this with only me? I asked him. I could ask you the same question. To my surprise, he suddenly took a step forward. You never try to argue with anyone else like this, even when they make you angry. We stared at each other for a moment. He didn't say anything more, but his meaning was clear as day. We both knew the reason. Maybe we had known on some subconscious level for a while, but now there was absolutely no denying it, even with all the apparent miscommunication that had been going on. The question was, which one of us was willing to put our pride aside and actually address the issue at hand? Finally, after the moment, I shifted where I was standing. When you said... We started speaking at the exact same time. We both paused. He nodded to me, signaling that it was okay for me to keep going. Well, I continued. When you said you regretted what you said that day, did you just mean you regretted how blunt you have been? Or did you have any second thoughts? Martin bit the inside of his cheek. Well, I thought back and realized that it had been fun, he confessed. And then, in a lower voice, he added, but it's been so long that I barely remember it. For a moment, I felt like all the blood in my body had rushed right back to my head. Well, I breathed after a second. We can always try to jog our memories. The words were hardly out of my mouth when Martin took one more step forward, completely closing the space between us and pressing his lips against mine like a man starved. I relaxed and my eyes shut. Jeez, I thought to myself as I held onto his shoulders. All that just to get this? We're complete idiots. Sometime later. Our trip drew to an end after 2 weeks. Our coworkers were surprised to see that Martin and I were on significantly better terms than we had been when we left for the trip. Glad to see you guys are getting along now, Dennis had told us when we showed up to the office the week after the trip ended. Forcing you guys into that room had been a good idea. I thought back to some of the things that had gone down in that room during the trip's final days. Getting along is a gross statement, I said mentally, but I didn't say that out loud. A couple weeks later, Martin and I were hanging out in his apartment. Lounging on his bed, we both laughed at our silliness. I guess we really did need to be stuck with each other to clear the air, Martin said. Dennis made the right call there. Yeah, the sauna thing was a crazy coincidence though, I said, my head resting on his chest. It must have been fate that moved Millie to tell me about it that day, Martin said. Shocked, I sat up to look at his face. She told you about it? I asked, blinking. She told you too? He watched me, his eyes wide. and then we both burst into an uncontrollable fit of laughter. Conclusion. Well, what do I have to say to defend myself now? Soon after that particular kiss in the hotel room, many others followed. And it didn't just stop at the kisses. As much as I appreciated Dennis and Millie's help, I couldn't deny that Martin and I had done the most part. And we had. If we hadn't infuriated each other like that, maybe we wouldn't have fallen into each other's arms just like that. The end.
Hopelessly in love with my straight best friend. Story 3.
I am gay, I said, looking straight into the eyes of my reflection. I was at my best friend's place, and Tom was in the bathroom. While he was busy taking a bath, I was busy reflecting on how I was going to break it to him the eternal truth about me. Despite being best friends for nearly 13 years now, I hadn't told Tom about it. I hadn't even hinted at it. I was not sure why I hid it for so long, but the partial answer could be that I had only recently come to peace with being gay. And now that months had passed after that, I wanted Tom to know about that too. It certainly did not help that I loved him. As far as I was aware, Tom was not homophobic. He regularly participated in any event to support the rights of our community. But I was afraid that he would not take lightly the fact that his best friend was a part of the community too. But at the same time, I wanted him to know it. What was the worst that could happen anyway? With that in mind, I repeated the sentence. I was confident I would let him know the same by tonight. I am gay, I said, and this time I sounded a little unsure. But that was not the case. I was sure I was gay. Heck, I had even kissed a guy and enjoyed doing it. So, I tried again. I am G. I stopped immediately. Tom had come out of the bathroom, and despite being in various states of undress himself, he curiously looked at me. I said, wear your darn clothes, man. Why are you freaking out? He laughed and pointed at his towel. I am not naked. Horror, I answered, even though my cheeks were flushed red. Tom was a part of our football team, and, well, you know the rest. As cliche as it sounded, Tom was everything I wanted to be, except I was way too lazy to exercise. As he dressed, I kept peeking glances at his broad shoulders. His shoulders were well defined, and it made sense why I liked hugging him so much. You could not argue against that if you knew Tom. Anyway, what were you saying in the mirror? Nothing. I wanted him to know, but I believed I wasn't ready after all. He raised an eyebrow at me. Are you going somewhere? No, I answered, genuinely confused now. Yeah, you were saying something, and then you stopped. Dude, drop it! I rolled my eyes and dropped face first onto his bed. It was done solely to hide my face from him. My coming out could wait. You are so annoying. What footballer takes so much time bathing anyway? I do, he answered. Feck others? Yeah, right. He dressed himself up, and I scrolled through my phone. Hurry up, he said 5 minutes later. I am dying of hunger. Yeah? And whose fault is that? At the little shop we often visited when we were too lazy to demand anything from our moms, I bravely expressed my opinions on a stranger sitting across from us. It was the first time I was so blatant about my appreciation for a man, and honestly, I dropped it as a hint for Tom. I was still scared to tell him about my being gay, so I decided maybe I should begin with smaller things. Right? So, in my bravery, I nodded at the man. Tom turned to look at him, and then looked back at me. What? He asked with his mouth full. When I made a face at him, he laughed and chewed more obnoxiously. Hell, this dude was disgusting. Why was I even in love with a loser like him anyway? I swallowed first before answering. He is nice. Nice as in? He stopped and looked at the stranger again. Do you know him? Do you mean he has a nice personality? Nice nature? What, dude? You finish your food first because you were dying of hunger just half an hour ago. And I will explain what I mean. Ooh. I was acting confident, as if my heart was not threatening to burst out of my chest. I said he is nice. Nice looking. I mean, look at the structure of his face. I believe that face belongs in a modeling campaign. And it seemed as if I was right. He was handsome as hell. "Whoa," Tom said, and his face changed the slightest. "And the slope of his shoulders?" "Yeah, he works out. His hair is nicely trimmed as well. He pays attention to how he looks. And I emphasized the word because this was going to be the last darn hint for the day. His hands, they are so... Brad." Tom laughed a dumb laugh. "I am trying to eat, Jesus." I shrugged. My face was red. "I am just appreciating a man, that's all. Men deserve appreciation as well." "Yeah," he agreed. "But from the girls?" I narrowed my eyes on him. "Kidding, man." He laughed, and I knew he was. "Maybe go and tell him. He will appreciate that, unless he does not like it or something." We turned to look at the man and found him staring back at us. Immediately, we moved our eyes to our food and ate in silence for the next 2 minutes before bursting into little gigglings. I hoped the man wouldn't take it as something bad. Then, when we were paying our bill, the stranger slid a folded napkin towards me. I did not even need to look at it to know what was there. Tom peered at the napkin and then stayed silent for a long while, and only broke the silence when I was about to walk in the direction of my home. "Hey," he said. "Yeah? Are you going to call him or something?" He shoved his hands into his pants pockets and did not look straight into my eyes. He was nervous. I did not know why. There was no reason. "Yeah, the same way you messaged Amy after the party night." "Yeah, but..." He went silent for a while. "Never mind, man. You have got a girlfriend, man. Let me fool around a bit. The dude's handsome and looked nice enough." I was not exactly a hint. It was right in his face. Except, I was not going to tell him straight away. "Yeah, but it's a..." He went silent. "Are you He stopped and stepped back. "Good night, man. See you at the school tomorrow." He blew a kiss at me and laughed like a maniac when I showed him my foot. But I stood at my porch long after he was gone. I could not understand some things about Tom, I knew, and this was one of them. When I entered my bedroom, I threw the napkin into the dustbin. "Sorry, Mr. Handsome Stranger. Maybe you would find someone better than me." At the school the next day, I could breathe the anticipation for prom. The prom fever was everywhere. It was almost like the school reeked of it. It was not like I was not excited about it, but some people were so excited they kind of ruined the fun of it. But then again, could I blame them for it? They were probably excited about spending some time, and maybe night, with their crush. And what was going on for me? The love of my life was busy with his girlfriend while I was still hung up on him. I did not even have the number of Mr. Handsome Stranger anymore to fool around with him. Man, my life was a mess. The old saying was true. Do not fall in love with a straight man of all people. Then again, it was not like I knew when I fell in love with him. To be very honest, and I was saying this as Tom's best friend, Tom was a nice guy. Besides his charming personality and attractive body, he was amazing to be around. He knew when to speak and when to shut up, and it was a nice thing. He gave the best hugs and even knew how to bake my favorite cookies. Of course, there were other issues with him. Like, he was impulsive. He did not work well under pressure. If it looked like he was handling pressure better, there was enough chance he would do something dumb soon. It was characteristic of him. I knew everything about him, yet I fell in love with him. I noticed, and I fell in love. Perhaps that was it, the reason why I did not know when I fell in love with him. It was precisely because of that when he announced he was going to date that sweet girl from the party after all, I did not go home and cry. Okay, that was a lie. I did cry a little bit, but even then, I accepted it without a fight. His relationship with Amy was another thing that was a part of his life. So what? I could remember another thing about him, but that did not mean I had to like Amy though. Although Amy was a nice girl, I did not have to like her, and that just made hating their relationship harder. I often felt like a loser. "You said you were going shopping?" I asked them at lunch. "Yeah, but Tom said he has a headache. I will go on my own," Amy replied. Behind her, Tom begged me to not say a word. How long has this fever been going on anyway? Brad, ask him to go to the hospital, please. He never listens to me. Fever? It was a lie. And now I had to make do with the little information I had about this new excuse. I swallowed my food first before answering. 3 weeks, I answered confidently. 3 weeks, Amy screamed. What the hell, why didn't you tell me? The question was directed at Tom. 3 weeks are a lot. Obviously, Amy answered, a hint of frustration in her voice. I shrugged at Tom when he glared at me. But it's getting better, I promise. Amy turned to look at me. Be honest, Brad. Is it getting better? I suppose. I snapped my tiffin shut. There was this thing lacing her tone, and I knew I had created trouble. I was worried they would fight. I am going for my next class. Tom held my hand. You still have 15 minutes to go. Yeah, but... I stopped and thought of a name. Ethan wanted to meet me at the library. Tom's hand loosened. Ethan? Why do you want to meet that loser anyway? None of your business, Tom, Amy answered, and asked him to leave me alone. Exactly. None of your business, I answered, though a little cheekily. He dropped his hand and let me leave. But it was clear to me. He was now in a sour mood too. Ethan and Tom had a long-standing rivalry. It was for a petty reason, but footballers liked holding on to every little mean thing anyway. It was the same for Tom and Ethan, and I had just taken Ethan's name. Of all people, it was clear he was sus. 2 days later, he dropped by my place. What are you doing here? I asked. Don't you have a, headache? He rolled his eyes for a dramatic second. Then he answered, We were going out shopping. He scrolled through his phone. As far as I know, Amy has done her shopping, and we are safe. I don't understand, I asked. Shopping, Brad, he said. I know your lazy arse will not go shopping until the last moment, and then you will pick up the dumbest looking stuff for prom, and I don't want my best friend to look stupid. He pointed into my room. Go, pick up your wallet and let's go. All right, I answered slowly, though I was secretly pleased. During the shopping, I asked him what he was trying to achieve. All boys dressed the same at prom, only girls had pretty clothes to wear. Oh, all right, he said. Then maybe we should buy you pretty dresses and wigs. You'd have a nosebleed then, I answered. Tom stopped for a while. Now, don't imagine me in them, you creep. Tom burst out laughing and showed me a pair of loafers. Let's begin from here. An hour later, you would find us in the same changing booth. We were dressed in what we intended to buy, and Tom was busy handling his hair. He looked at my reflection and nodded his head in appreciation. You look good in black, he said. Yeah, I answered with a straight face, but I was secretly pleased. It brings out the color. Here. He grabbed his tie and stepped a little closer. Help me with this. I swallowed. There isn't even a need for that, I answered. It looks nice. Help me, dude. He insisted and shoved the tie right in my face. Help, sir. Everyone knew what this looked like. I decided to not look at his face because I knew that even though I knew how to tie a tie, I would forget. So, I took the tie from his hand and decided to do as was asked of him. My hands were trembling, so my fingers touched his face a few times. I swear to God, if we were boyfriends, I would have kissed him. You know this is the first time I have noticed you are so short. When I did not answer, he went on, I have to dip my head to stare right into your eyes, shorty. He laughed, that loser. Your girlfriend is likely going to be shorter than you, and you guys going to make the shortest pair of lovers. That dumb loser, I needed him to shut up. I should have prayed for myself. I am gay, I told him. He stilled. Okay, he said sometime later. I wanted to tell you, but I wasn't sure how. The tie was done, but I kept my hands on his chest. He did not push them away either. But yeah, that's the truth. I am gay. I like boys. So, I stopped, shrugged, and then looked into his eyes. I will not have a girlfriend. Maybe a boyfriend. most likely taller than me. Okay, he said again. Thanks for telling me. I was slightly disappointed, but that was because he did not repeat the same. I wanted him to say, "Hey Brad, I am gay too," or "Hey Brad, I am bi." That would have been nice of him. You are not upset? Upset about you liking guys? What's the issue with that? They were rhetorical questions. I did not need to answer them. Whether you like chicks or Shut up. And we laughed. Thanks. Yeah, he answered, and then smiled. He cleared his throat and looked down at my hands on his chest. I removed them immediately as a red flush crept on my cheeks. I guess we look good. He pointed at our reflection. We look perfect, I answered. Yeah, I know. He looked into my eyes through the reflection, and I knew things were going to change between us. 2 days after that, and 3 nights before the prom, we had a sleepover at my place. My parents, who were already familiar with our routine, were already asleep, and the entire house was silent, save for the noise from the TV and our giggles and laughs. I just had to make sure we were not too loud, and I knew it was going to be okay. Remember that guy from that evening? The Model 1, as you put it, he began all of a sudden. Yeah? I was sleepy, and my words slurred a lot. Did you call him? No, I answered. Did you message him then? He asked, sounding a little confident now. Nope. He took a deep breath. And Ethan. Is something going on between you two? Oh, hell no. I snorted. Isn't he like your enemy or something? I am not gonna backstab you, Tom. Yeah, thanks for that, he answered and laughed, then lay down beside me. But, you know, you can date whoever you want, all right? Just because I am not good with them doesn't mean you cannot date them. Yeah, well, thanks for the permission. But if my best friend doesn't like someone for whatever reason, I don't like them either. Tom smiled. He looked more comfortable now. Earlier, he looked constipated. Well, I am still glad you told me about it, though. Just in case you're too happy, my parents have known it for a longer time. I am glad no one's troubling you then. You will take care of them for me? I will, he answered in a promising tone. Brad, he said, and then fell asleep. I switched off the TV and the bedside lamp. It was ironic. He was so close to me and yet not enough. The problem between Amy and him started the next day. In the evening, I received a message from him. He asked if I wanted to go to the park. It was not always that he asked for that, but whenever he did, it meant something was troubling him. Park always sounded like a cry for help. I always imagined it as a signal. I told him I would be there. In the park, he told me about the recent argument he had with Amy. It was over something trivial, he said, but it was clear he was hiding something from me. He also confessed that Amy and he had been having some trouble in their relationship for some time, and it just made me curious about the state of their relationship, because it was still 4 months into their relationship. She is usually so nice, but when she's down, she gets so vicious. It's hard to keep everything in control when she is so mean, he told me. Did you do something? Me? No. Lord knows what I did. Maybe try understanding her. It was tough playing mediator between the two when I loved Tom so much. It should work, I believe. I cannot be the only understanding person in the relationship, he argued. I agree, I answered. But I want to end it all with her, he confessed, and that silenced me. Tom? I feel like she's keeping me from important people I don't know. He looked into my eyes. And I don't want to lose important people for her. She's your girlfriend, I said. Yet, I do not want to be with her. We sat there for hours. We talked, but we were mostly silent. Tom made a lot of confessions, and I was surprised at most. I guess during one of those confessions, my resolve to keep myself to myself ended. Or maybe it was just bad planning. But when Tom looked at me again, and it seemed like there were just 2 of us, I leaned in to kiss him. I expected to be shoved back or to be hit, or Tom to get upset at me for taking it too far, but I did not expect him to kiss me in return. That was the kind of reaction I was not expecting. Lo and behold, whatever strength I lacked in the kiss, Tom fulfilled it for me. He kissed me so passionately that I thought, well, at least I was right about one thing. Things were going to change between us. Next came the evening of the prom itself. Tom and I did not kiss after that evening in the park, and frankly, we did not even talk about it. We mutually decided it was best left unsaid. I did not know if he had told Amy about it or something else, so I kept my mouth shut. It hurt, but it was what it was, and I expected it to be just that. Then, something else happened. Amy and Tom had a small argument the evening before prom. So, the initial plan of them arriving together at the venue changed, and in the end, Tom and I went to the prom together. Amy was still there, waiting for him to reach. Instead of anticipating meeting her after the argument, Tom was more interested in complaining about the current state of his relationship. In his opinion, he was pretty sure something was missing in his relationship. I had little idea about what that was, so I did not encourage this doubt in his head. Whatever he wanted, I was sure he would work towards that anyway. We soon reached the school, and there she was, Amy, waiting for him in a pretty red dress. If I were straight, I would have liked her too. But the truth was that I didn't. And, at this moment, she was my rival. Tom went to meet her, and I walked out of there. I did not want to see them kiss, thank you very much. From what I knew about the couple's plan, Amy wanted Tom and her to win the best titles of the evening, Prom Queen and Prom King, and the chances of that were high. Tom was already known because he belonged to our school's only good sports team, and Amy was a good student with a very good face. She was popular, just like him. The chances were high. I found my corner with my friends. Amy and Tom disappeared half an hour into the prom. I did not care what they were doing, but hoped they were not busy making babies. 10 minutes later, Amy returned to the main crowd. She looked flushed, which was not my favorite look on her, but there was something more. And none of it was obvious until I saw her hurriedly talking to her friends. I realized something was wrong. But instead of going to her, I looked for Tom. It was not hard to find him, but it took me 15 minutes just to get to him. I found him squinting at the fairy lights on the school building. He acted like he was drunk out of his mind. I looked at the broad lines of his shoulders for a moment before deciding I needed to talk to him, if only to make sure he was all right. "Hey," I said. "Hey," he answered without looking. "Did she tell you already?" "Tell me what?" I asked. "Is everything okay between you two?" "No," he hissed. "Of course nothing's okay with us." He rubbed a hand over his hair in frustration. "We broke up." It shocked me. From the way Tom talked about their relationship, it was clear he was not happy with how things were going between them. But this was still shocking. "What?" I said. "How's that possible?" I had only seen them laughing some time ago. How was the breakup possible? "Well, isn't it obvious, Brad?" he asked and finally looked at me. What I saw shocked me. His face was red, and there were tears of frustration in his eyes. He was not only upset but also hurt. And confused, I guessed. It was not the first time I had seen this side of him, but it certainly was just as shocking. "Isn't it clear enough, Brad?" "I don't understand," I answered with honesty. I was confused, but he did not answer. He kept his eyes on me. I tried to reason with him. "Tom," I began, "I am sorry for kissing you. I am sorry for doing everything wrong, but if this is because of me, please don't break up with her." But that was not enough. He had other things to say. "It's not because of you," he answered. "I am still sorry," I replied. But he did not stop looking at me. It looked as if in this moment of weakness, he wanted some kind of reassurance from me. And where could I find it? In the touch. And I followed my gut instincts. Before I could think of doing or saying anything, I kissed him. But it was not exactly a bad idea, and that was precisely because he kissed me back. I could not understand the moral implications behind whatever we did, but kissing him felt good. And if his hands on me were any indication, the feeling was reciprocated. When it got too much, Because of course kissing your crush did that. I tried to step back and take a couple of breaths to understand whatever the heck I was doing. But Tom did not feel the same. When I tried to step back, he chased my mouth for another kiss. And that was telling enough, I believed. I still did not know what he was. Was he gay? Was he bi? Was he still straight? Or was it that he just did not care about that at all? I could not tell. But we kissed as if we did not have another day to live. We were forgetful of the world around us in those moments, but it was not going to stay like that always. Just when I started relaxing under his touch, we heard several gasps from a little distance. Tom pushed me away. I stumbled but did not hurt myself. I was okay physically, but mentally and emotionally, I was shocked and hurt. Tom? What the FTEek was that? It was one of Amy's friends. The trio belonged to the social circle of Amy's high school. It was bad news. Is that why you broke up with Amy? Another one asked. Because you wanted to kiss your best friend? Male best friend. The third one added and giggled. Are you gay? He stepped towards them and shook his head. No, I am not. Brad kissed me suddenly, and I didn't know. Brad, he said, and turned to me. Please tell them you're gay. I was too shocked to speak. What the hell was he doing? Is Brad gay? What wow? The three giggled together. I did not know that. Are you serious? They discussed it among themselves. I mean, look at him. And the three looked at me. Their faces looked devilish. I did not know who I was more angry with. They or my best F-skecking friend in the entire world, Tom Simpson. When they left, Tom turned to me. His expression told me he was scared, but that was not enough. I knew what those girls were capable of. They would go and tell everyone about it, and I was not ready to tell it to any outsider. Heck, I did not even think they needed to know that. In the end, I decided I couldn't care less if the entire world knew of being gay. What hurt me was Tom, and how easy it was for him to throw me under the bus. Tom came closer to me, but I swatted his hand away. Everything happened so suddenly that I did not know how to react to anything. Instead of confronting him for what he did, I ran away from there. This was the first time I had cried this year. Tom came after me, but I shoved him away. The first thing I did when I reached home was cry into my father's arms. He was the first to know I was gay. Instead of bothering me with questions, my mom gave me a warm glass of milk and let me go to sleep early tonight. It was still 8. It was way too soon. But did I care? From where I stood, I saw nothing but a mess. I had lost everything, and there was no other way of looking at any of this. When Tom started calling me, I switched off my phone. I did not want to see or talk to him. 4 days passed, and Tom had made exactly 34 attempts to apologize to me in front of my parents. In the beginning, my parents scolded him for his selfishness and asked him to apologize to me whenever I decided to talk to him. Each time, he passionately answered that he would do so. But even then, I did not bother seeing him. Another day passed, and then another. Are they saying something? My dad asked. Like? I did not move my eyes from the TV screen. My bum hurt from how long I had been sitting in the same spot. I moved a little to ease the pain. The kids at school, he began. Are they bullying you? Saying something mean? They can try to, I hissed, anger in my voice. I am sure Tom will teach him a... I abruptly stopped. I did not know where that came from. I will teach them a F-seeking lesson. Hey, no swearing, my mom shouted from the kitchen. Talk to him, Brad, my dad said softly after a few moments. He hurt me, I told him. Tell him that. Why should I... The doorbell rang, and I stopped. Probably Mom's delivery. And you need to check, he told me. I huffed and checked the door. Of all people, it turned out to be Amy. Can we talk? She asked. I sighed. All right. I gestured to her to come in. No, outside is okay, she said. I sighed again and nodded. It was past 10, and my parents asked me to stay close to home. I promised I would. What is it? I asked when we were a short distance from home. Geez, shouldn't you apologize first? My boyfriend broke up with me for you. I said, the confusion evident on my face. Just apologize, she said. Sorry? I said. I am sorry. I am. There wasn't any need, but thanks for making me feel good. Anyway, because it's late, I will go straight to the point. Tom needs you. I scoffed. Heck, if I care. I understand what happened was wrong, and Tom is at fault for what he did. But to be very honest, it was mostly my friend's fault. They should have used their brains. It was wrong, and they will apologize to you as well. But listen, she said. Tom is missing. What does that even mean? He is not at his home, and his parents refuse to say anything. He has been missing for 3 days, and his parents are not doing anything. And I have zero idea where he is. Please, find him. Hold on. I don't understand. What happened? She shrugged. Only he can tell. She patted my shoulder. But only you can find him. We told his parents that if we could not find him, we would report it to the police. Please, we don't want to deal with the police. Find him, she pleaded. She stepped into her car. When you do, phone me. I need to talk to him too. Then she left. I swallowed. It did not make sense at all. Where did he go? I ran home, informed my parents of my intention to find Tom, and left before they could understand what the hell I was saying. I called him, but he did not pick up. The more I called, and the more he did not pick up, the more panicked I felt. Half an hour passed, and I was still nowhere, and it was then that I thought of the park. Without waiting a moment, I ran towards it. And just as I had predicted, he was there and in our favorite spot in the entire area. What shocked me was that he was lying on the grass with a backpack under his head. It was not the kind of sight I expected to see. I ran up to him, breathing hard, and screamed at him. He sat up straight immediately, though he seemed a little groggy. Oops. I had just woken him up from sleep. Whoa, what? He asked. What are you doing, Tom? Why are you not at home? Is that you, Brad? Yeah, that's me, I answered. Now tell me what's going on? What's the meaning of all of this? Why are you not at home? What happened? Hey, take a breath, he said, and held my hand. I will tell you everything. Tom confessed he was gay, and that he was afraid of accepting that part of him. So, Amy was the option to help him deal with it. It did not work out. After the prom night, he informed his parents of the same. His parents did not like that at all, further cementing his previous assumptions that being gay was trouble. I held his hand as he explained everything to me. He said when his parents realized he was speaking the truth, they kicked him out, and they asked him to never return to them again. Being a hard-headed teenager, he decided to not return either. That was why he was here. And I am FC-sicking sorry, Brad. I shouldn't have done that to you. I wanted to come to you, but I was so sorry for what I had done, Brad. I couldn't. Hey, it's all right. It wasn't entirely your fault. Now get up. Why? You're coming home with me. It did not take too long for my parents to understand what had happened. Though they were still upset at him, they accepted Tom and let him stay with us in my bedroom. He apologized to all of us throughout the night and every night after that. It took me a while, but I accepted his apologies. 2 weeks after that, we received emails in our notification. It was from the same college. News? We were selected in the same college. So, the four of us celebrated the news. After, at night, as we were preparing for bed, Tom poked me in my shin and apologized again. Jesus, I said, a little groggy. You scared the hell out of me. I sighed and turned to the side where he was sleeping on the mattress on the floor. What? He was not on the mattress. He was right in front of me. Are we okay? He asked. Yeah, I answered. He took a deep breath. Brad, I was thinking something. I looked at the clock. Even though my heart was beating fast and I was no longer sleepy, this proximity was going to be the death of me. It's 1. Would you go out with me? Eh? I asked and swallowed. I knew exactly what he wanted. What? Go out with me as my boyfriend? Tom? Is that a no? Ha ha ha. Just as he tried to move away, I grabbed his neck and kissed him. And did he return the kiss? Well, considering the weight on me, I'd say he did. Conclusion. Tom's parents never really tried to contact him again for good things. If they did, it was mostly to remind him that he still had some chance. It was the strangest argument, even from my parents' point of view. Because Tom had nowhere else to go, my parents decided to let him stay with us until we had to move out of the city for college. In our relationship, we might have gone on a couple of dates after that kiss and some more. We did not name our relationship, but it was okay like that. But anyone could say we looked like a couple. We decided to look for an apartment near the college, and we found one 1 hour away from the institution. It was the cheapest. We will move there soon, and perhaps our relationship would begin afresh from there. The end. Is there a way parents can be stopped from going so far as to throw their kids out of the home for simply being gay? Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing to become a part of our Rainbow Force and stay wholesome.